Well, let's start off with some memes, some posts on X all about Palantir. They had a banger earnings and the stock soared more than 23% as AI powers strong earnings and guidance. Cramer keeps posting. Jim Cramer, known for famously calling the top at the wrong time all the time, has become a bit of a meme. But he says, total heavyweight, exceptional call, awesome company. Cramer keeps posting about it and it won't go down. And so Mads Capital is talking about me driving to work, knowing the Palantir is now at 100, and it's just a hilarious video of Mads Mikkelsen crying in the car because clearly he doesn't own enough Palantir, I guess.
So one thing people don't really realize, unless you follow Cramer, if you actually scroll his feed, he's almost schizophrenic with his predictions. One day he's saying, oh, this way overpriced, this has got to drop. The next day he's like, I'm super long. So he's just engagement farming constantly. Yep. And so that's the lens you need to view Cramer for, which just means almost any company on earth, you're going to be able to find him bull posting and bear posting. And so go scroll his feed. It's quite entertaining. But for every one post of his that goes like really viral on sort of Teapot and TechX, he's got 10 others about the same company. So anyways, excited to get into Palantir. They were dominating the timeline.
And I wanted to kick it off with a great throwback post. This is from Praying for Exits. One of my favorite super random things is that the Wu-Tang Clan were some of the earliest Palantir supporters. And Raekwon the Chef posted in 2010 when basically no one knew about Palantir. It was a private company. It hadn't even raised, I think, all that much money. And he says, just got to Palantir Technologies headquarters. If you don't know about them, Google them. And
insane.
I love that. And somehow they linked up with Alex Karp, I guess, and the Palantir crew and came through and had a good time with the Palantir team. But it really speaks to just the bizarre culture at Palantir that they have, rappers coming through and then they are employing former senators and, very important people in the military and just kind of doing it all. And so Dr. Karp was pictured in the Middle East. Maktoum bin Mohammed said, technology and innovation are key drivers of future economic growth. Today, I met with Dr. Alexander C. Karp, co-founder and chief executive officer at Palantir Technologies, to explore opportunities for accelerating the adoption of artificial intelligence. And, he's just in a room of absolute killers out in the Middle East. And as a reminder, this is from Eliano over at Palantir, good friend of the show. We are less than 2 weeks away from the release of Dr. Karp's book. So if you haven't pre-ordered it already, go check it out.
You got the copy on your desk there, John?
I got the copy, and I also have the audiobook pre-ordered. And so you can go on Audible right now and use one of the credits if you have that, and or you can order the hard copy. It should be out in a few weeks. And we're looking forward to reviewing that once it goes live. Here's a little bit of a quote from the earnings call. CTO Shamsankar, good friend of the show, on DeepSeek and disagreeing with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. We are at war with China. We are in an AI arms race, says Sham. I got into a disagreement with Sam Altman about this at the Senate AI Summit over a year ago. There is an opposing view that we can all get along and cooperate on these things. I'm sure the other side feels quite different, realizing their IP has been stolen. How many times are we going to believe that anchors dragged across the sea that cut undersea cables? Maybe it's espionage. China knows they're at war. We kind of equivocate on it as a peace-loving nation. The engineering on R1 is exquisite. The optimizations they've done are really impressive. We have to wake up with respect for our adversary and realize that we are competing. But they absolutely did steal a lot of that through distillation of the models, and perhaps they stole even more. We have to realize that the AI race is winner take all, and it's going to be a whole of nation effort that extends well beyond the DoD in order for us to win as a nation. And so I loved that quote, and I thought it was important to highlight that. I mean, these Palantir earnings calls are like the Super Bowl for defense tech companies. Like, you need to be watching these because there's so much gold and so many good takes in there.
Karp's energy on the stream was insane. I mean, obviously they were putting up big numbers, but the entire vibe coming at it. I mean,
Yeah.
if your stock goes on that much of a rip, it's hard not to have everybody be pretty excited about what's going on. But Eliana's been on a tear, Karp's been on a tear,
Yeah.
and they're clearly having a lot of fun. And they have this amazing dynamic with their shareholders, right? It doesn't feel like they're lecturing. They have made it feel like everybody's a part of this bigger, broader, important movement,
Yep.
and in many ways a part of the, supporting the US's efforts to, further its national interest.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I was at the Palantir headquarters, and they have all these memes that go out in Slack and then get printed and put on the walls. And my favorite one was the Grim Reaper meme, and it was like, Palantir will never be a $10 billion stock. Palantir will never be bigger than Lockheed. Palantir will never be worth $100 a share. And they've just blown through every, it could never happen moment. And Karp just loves it. He brings this amazing energy to the office. He has all these crazy, I don't even know like what I can say or not, but he like just works out constantly in the office. He carries these kettlebells around. He believes that if you can carry your body weight in split between two kettlebells, and walk around for 60 seconds, I think that's like an extremely strong health metric. And so everyone should be able to do that. And he brings this just like
farmer carries.
Farmer carries. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, on the next,
and small note,
yep.
And relevant to our friends and partners over at Bezel.
Oh, yeah.
He has fantastic taste in watches. He wears a beautiful, Aquanaut with the orange band. We worked with the Bezel team to identify it last time he was presenting with it, and it's hard to miss. It's a beautiful piece. Anyways, onto the report.
Yeah, and so Eliano posted, "Are you not entertained? Karp after earnings, looking fantastic. Hilarious red beanie." And ski gear.
Also, somebody bought sent the CTO a beanie of sorts.
Yeah. Purple.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure why, but we'll see.
I'm into that joke.
Well, let's move on to Palantir earnings. So just to give you the high level, this is for Q1 fiscal year 2025. So looking back the last 3 months, revenue surged 36% year over year with record operating margins. They achieved GAAP profitability and delivered bold guidance, 31% revenue growth forecast for 2025. The stock price spiked 20% following the earnings announcement. And so they've been growing both on the government side and the commercial side. For people that don't, there's this meme like no one knows what Palantir does. It's really not that complicated. It is an enterprise software as a service company that does data aggregation and data analytics. They don't actually own data. You go to Palantir and you store your data with them. Snowflake is a competitor.
And one thing to note, the fact that they're projecting this level of growth at a time when pretty much every government contractor is under attack.
Oh yeah.
Due to Doge's activities just shows that they themselves, as well as the market, believe what they're doing is critical enough that it's not at risk of Doge and Elon's team coming in and saying, hey, why are we spending $10 million a year for this database? Like we could rebuild this, in a few weeks.
Yeah. And you see that on the commercial side. Boeing has been a public client of Palantir. They put all of the parts data into Palantir, and then, or maybe it's Airbus. There's a few different companies, but you can think about it like you're manufacturing airplanes. There's a whole bunch of pieces that you need to track. How many do we have in inventory? What's broken? What's not? How do we move that through the system? And that actually drives a lot of efficiency. So that's why Palantir has been like a valuable product for the government, because it actually drives efficiency. And Elon posted just recently on X, like, Dr. Karp is a hero. Like, I love Alex Karp. Like, he's great because he's very much aligned with the mission of Doge and what Luke Ferrator is doing over there, understanding the data and making better decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting to think there's a world where Elon would have been a co-founder of Palantir. Like, it doesn't even sound that crazy given, at the stage at which Palantir was started, but there was obviously a lot of different activity happening at that time.
Yeah. And so you need to think about Palantir as two main revenue streams: government contracts and commercial deals. On the government side, they grew 45% year over year, driven by defense and intelligence projects, which they often can't talk about, but they can just give you the high level how they're doing financially. And this has provided a stable recurring revenue base and strategic credibility. Everyone knows, oh, if it's good enough for the CIA or the government, it's probably good enough for my organization. And then on the commercial deals, U.S. commercial revenue jumped 64% year over year, even bigger than the government contracts. And they are focused on ultra high value, large clients across finance, healthcare, manufacturing, et cetera, which I mentioned. And they have a strategy of fewer, deeper relationships that enhances stickiness and upsell potential. So Palantir is this famous example of forward deployed engineers. They actually send Palantir employees into an organization, help them understand how to implement the software, how to get all the data into one Palantir installation, and then be able to drive all the analytics and mapping over it. One of the greatest examples, just to concretize how Palantir works, since a lot of people think it's still pretty abstract, is you can think back during the Iraq War, and when the troops were in Afghanistan, there were a lot of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And so you want to find the bomb maker who's making all these bombs and blowing up cars and civilians and US troops. And so what you do is every time a bomb goes off, they inventory what they found at the bomb site. So they look and they say, okay, we found dynamite at this one. And over there, we found C4. And over here, we found some other plastic explosive. And then here we found nails. And here they used shrapnel from old grenades, or here they used landmines. And so you put all of those on a map, and pretty soon you can see that, hey, the ones that use C4 and nails, those are all clustered within a 20-mile drive of this one town. So the bomb maker that's making that type of bomb must be in that town. And so it's a very easy way where you load it all up in the database, you slice it all up, and then you can just see it visualized on a map, and that helps the troops figure out where the bad guys are, essentially. And then there's a million other examples, but that's a very concrete one where you can imagine just dots on a map being valuable. And it doesn't sound revolutionary, but it was at the time, and it still is in many ways, because there just aren't that many databases that were in-house and working very well. And so that drove a lot of early adoption. And now Palantir is used for all sorts of things. It's a big company, but that's an example.
And part of the bull case is that Salesforce, another enterprise software provider, they have an incredible distribution engine, very broad product that many large companies and SMBs build on top of, but they have less of a moat in the sense that somebody else can say, hey, I'm going to build a really specialized CRM for this one opportunity, and then just start selling into those customers.
Yep.
Whereas Palantir has, almost 2 decades now of work in Washington, building these distribution channels, getting contracts, earning trust. And so when you think about the, moat for the business, it's just much more meaningful than your typical SaaS provider that has to go through someone like Vanta and get, approval. SOC 2 compliance is just like an entirely new level on this side.
Yeah, totally. One of the reasons the stock jumped this year was because I believe Palantir received the highest credential approval from the government on FedRAMP, I believe. So they're able to integrate at the deepest level with the government. And so in terms of geopolitical and where they're pulling their revenue from globally, the U.S. market continues to dominate with rapid adoption in both government and commercial segments. But Europe is now 13% of revenue, but this revenue only grew 4% year over year due to regulatory and cultural challenges. Leadership warns that European institutions risk falling behind in the AI revolution. This is something we've talked a lot about. They're so privacy concerned and so sclerotic with how they move through things that they're not adopting the latest technologies, and that's something we certainly hope changes in Europe in the coming years. And then Palantir's also been expanding into other territories. They have an active initiative in Japan. It's a $50 million deal with a major insurer, and they've made strategic moves in the Middle East and Asia Pacific, like that image that we saw earlier. And so they firmly avoid business with adversarial nations like China and Russia, aligning with a pro-Western stance. And Karp has been beating the drum on being a pro-Western company for a very, very long time, way before it was cool. And he's built that upon all of his philosophical research in Germany and all the different philosophical thoughts that he's processed to understand what will create the ultimate amount of peace in the world. And so he's built his business around that, and obviously foregone a lot of revenue that could have been, hey, yeah, let's sell to China. Why not? And I'm sure a lot of competitors would say, yeah, sure, it's a global market. Let's just go for it.
It's very hard to be American and hate Palantir. You got to do some crazy, crazy mental gymnastics to get to that point.
Yeah. And so they are really like the big question with Palantir is, I think at the beginning of the year, it was maybe last year, it was around like 2023, 2024, it was at like $10 a share, and now it's at 100, something like that. It's been a 10 bagger for a ton of people, and a lot of that's been around the AI narrative that it's more important than ever to aggregate data for AI analysis, and then also work with proprietary data for AI systems that isn't just the open web. And so the model layer, as you've mentioned, is commoditizing in some ways, but the models that are built on private repositories of company data or government data, those certainly aren't commoditizing, and that data is not being moved into large-scale open source LLMs anytime soon. And so they've positioned strategically into advanced data and AI capabilities. They've had an emphasis on operationalizing AI by integrating it with proprietary data and workflows, and they launched the artificial intelligence platform, AIP, to enable rapid, customizable AI solutions. This has had a customer impact. Examples include reducing underwriting processing time from 2 weeks to 3 hours for insurance companies, and accelerating digital transformation across sectors with high switching costs. They have a unique full stack approach that differentiates Palantir from cloud giants and pure play AI firms, but they must continuously innovate to fend off commoditization and growing competition. But they have done a great job of building a really insane team of engineers, and it's still the company's over 20 years old at this point, and they're still recruiting top grads out of top colleges, and it's like still a hot place to work, which is very rare.
It's harder than ever to recruit talent out of Palantir, even though many of them are ambitious and would want to join other similar companies or start their own company. But many, given the growth of the company just over the last year, some of their packages are pretty much impossible to compete with at this point. Just given, I looked on public, and this exactly a year ago, the stock was at $17 a share. It's sitting over 100 right now. So if you joined Palantir as like a new grad engineer and got some type of relatively basic offer, it's now nearly 5x what it initially was slated for. So pretty incredible.
Yeah. So Palantir's competitive advantage in AI comes from that interplay of data, context, and action. The company spent nearly 2 decades building software to integrate, clean, and model vast troves of data for complex organizations. That groundwork now serves as the ideal conduit for AI. Many companies can train an AI model, but Palantir's ability to pipe the output of those models straight into decision-making systems on sensitive, critical data, all while handling security, privacy, and regulatory compliance is key. Palantir essentially offers an out-of-the-box operating system for AI in the enterprise. This is not easily replicated because it requires trust and a track record of solving hairy data problems. As Karp bragged, Palantir had early insights years ago that AI would require this kind of infrastructure, and that foresight has now evolved from theory to fact. And this is true. You can go back and look at even at interviews with Peter Thiel in like the mid 2000s, where he's talking about the vision for Palantir and the ability to look at a vast trove of data and ideally stop the next 9/11 before it even happens. And it's this weird thing where there's always been this question of like, what is Palantir's real impact? And it's like, well, we might not see it because if it doesn't happen, it's not going to be news, and it's probably not even going to be
We don't
public.
want to know every single daily threat against the United States, right? In a perfect world, it doesn't hit the news, right? That usually means something bad happened. But yeah, it's been interesting to see people go from nobody even knowing people being aware of the company Palantir, but not being, having any idea what they did. But looking back at the growth of the company over the last year, Palantir being a big data company supporting both the government and big corporates, it almost was a pure play AI bet because they're able to actually leverage all of that data and help their customers and clients start to understand it and then take action against it. So seems all very obvious in hindsight. It's not without risks. This show is for entertainment purposes only, as you all know, but currently they are sitting at a 552 PE ratio. So
it's up there.
If you're building in defense tech and you're raising a new round and you got a little bit of earnings, ask for the Palantir multiple.
For sure.
It's it's bold, but you never know. You might get a deal done.
I agree with you. I mean, it is bold, and you're through like the Warren Buffett lens. And I saw some weird meme that I didn't get a chance to screenshot, but it was somebody saying like, oh, like somebody just called them the next Salesforce, or like they're as important as a company as Salesforce, and they were like, this is ridiculous. Like Salesforce like prints so much more profit or whatever. But when I just think about like the vibe of the institution, like what Palantir is, like it feels like as much of a force as certainly as Salesforce. And so I wouldn't be surprised if over time they catch up. And Salesforce is, I think, an extra decade older, maybe. It is an older company. They've had more time to grow and scale. And I'm just super bullish on a founder-led company that's still able to attract talent. And
Karp's energy levels right now.
He's just not going to stop. He's just not going to stop. And so it feels like there might be some meme stock dynamic, but that ultimately just lowers the cost of capital and allows him to keep building. And eventually, if things catch up, it's going to be really good. And he's going into a pretty favorable administration for this stuff. Obviously, Elon's commented on it. Obviously, the DoD is investing more in technology, and all signs point to just more Palantir everywhere.
Yeah, they enter the Japanese market and do one deal that's worth 50 million, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you can easily imagine Japan, a single country, becoming a multi-billion-dollar revenue line for the company. So
and so a lot of it just depends on how much you believe the AI story. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of takes on both sides there, but it is an interesting one, and it's there have certainly been crazier meme stock stories told in the past.
Yeah, if you look at not that we're calling Palantir a meme stock, even though maybe it's getting priced similar to GameStop, but lowering GameStop's cost of capital by it being a meme stock does nothing for America, right? They're now in the same position, which is that everybody's buying video games online.
Yep.
And maybe they become an important distribution channel for mod retro, right? But that mod retro by itself is not necessarily going to sustain GameStop in the long run, right? It's just video games have been particularly cruel to the retail side of that industry. So
I remember, I think it was last year, maybe even the year before, I was hanging out with Shyam Sankar, this CTO, and was asking him like kind of what's the next goal for Palantir, and he was saying like, well, we got to get into the S&P 500. And I was like, man, that's a tall order. Like you're already a public company. Like that's a big goal. I have never heard anyone operating a company say that as their goal. And he did it. Yeah. And that drives a ton of institutional investing capital into the business. And a lot of those ETFs and funds that hold S&P 500 stay there for a long time as shareholders and they're very much in it for the long term. So
the game never ends, right? We got to get we got to go public. We got to break into the S&P 500.
Yep.
We got to become $1 trillion market cap company, and then so. Anyways,
the big story has been that this year Palantir became I think the highest value defense company of all, bigger than Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, and by some measures bigger than many of them combined. And there's this question of like,
and we're seeing
it's so crazy. They're so much smaller on a revenue scale, but it's a software company, and so the margins eventually should be much higher than you have to make you make an aircraft and it's really expensive, but a ton of that got eaten up in cost and overhead. Whereas once a SaaS system is actually installed, it can be very lucrative for a very long time. We've seen this in every software company that's IPO'd in the last 20 years, basically.